two young girls were found murdered near a quiet park. At first, police thought the case was solved when one father confessed. But years later, new DNA showed the real killer, and the truth shocked everyone. May 8th, 2005 began as a calm and sunny Sunday in Zion, Illinois. Mother's Day. 8-year-old Laura Hobbs spent part of the afternoon with her family, flying kites along the Lake Michigan shoreline, laughing and chasing colors against the wind. That same day, around 3 p.m., Laura met up with her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias. The girls were inseparable, often seen biking around their neighborhood and playing in the local parks. Their homes were just a few blocks apart, and the nearby park was a familiar place, safe, well-trafficked, and surrounded by houses. When the girls left that afternoon, no one imagined anything unusual. Their parents expected them home by dinner. But by 7 p.m., when neither Laura nor Crystal had returned, a growing unease set in. Calls were made between families. Neighbors were asked. At first, it felt like maybe the girls had lost track of time. But by 9 p.m., with no sign of them, the families contacted police. Officers quickly joined the search, canvassing the neighborhood and nearby areas. They confirmed with other children and residents that Laura and Crystal had been seen riding their bikes through the area earlier that day. As the night deepened, flashlights swept through the park. Volunteers, canine units, and officers combed wooded trails, open fields, and side streets. Still, there were no clues. No bikes, no jackets, no signs. Around dawn, most of the searchers paused, waiting for daylight to return. But Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, and her grandfather refused to stop. While others rested, they pressed deeper into the park's wooded edges, determined to keep looking. At approximately 6:00 a.m. on May 9th, 2005, the search took a harrowing turn. In the early light of morning, Laura Hobbs's grandfather heard a sudden, anguished cry from nearby. Rushing toward the sound, he found Jerry Hobbs, Laura's father, standing motionless in a patch of dense undergrowth near the bike trail that ran through the park. Jerry was frozen in place, his eyes locked on a horrifying scene. Lying side by side in the grass were the bodies of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. Both girls had been brutally attacked. Laura had suffered 20 stab wounds, while Crystal had 11. The extent of violence shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Police arrived quickly, securing the area and cordoning off the park. It was immediately classified as a double homicide. The discovery devastated the small town of Zion. Violent crime was rare in the quiet community, and the murders of 2 young children, so close to their homes, sent waves of grief and fear through the city. Neighbors gathered, some crying, others in disbelief, as officers moved through the brush, collecting evidence and photographing the scene. Authorities took note of the fact that Jerry Hobbs, who had continued searching after most others had stopped, was the one to find the bodies. That detail did not go unnoticed. Investigators quietly began considering the possibility that the discovery itself could be significant. As the crime scene was processed and word spread through Zion, a sense of urgency took hold. What had started as a search for 2 missing girls had transformed into a homicide investigation, one marked by brutality, mystery, and rising suspicion. The case was now wide open, and what lay ahead would challenge the community and the criminal justice system in unexpected ways. In the hours following the discovery, police turned their attention to Jerry Hobbs. His criminal record raised immediate red flags. Jerry had a documented history of drug offenses and violent behavior. Most notably, in 2001, he had been involved in a disturbing incident in Texas where he threatened people with a chainsaw. Recently released from prison, he had rejoined his family in Zion only weeks before the murders. Detectives brought him in for questioning. For hours, Jerry denied involvement in the killings. He sat in the interrogation room as investigators pressed him, repeatedly returning to inconsistencies in his story and his reactions to questions. The interview extended late into the night and through the following morning. After more than 20 hours without sleep, Jerry Hobbs broke. He gave a detailed confession, claiming the violence began when he confronted Laura for disobeying. According to the statement, during the confrontation, Crystal allegedly picked up a knife. In a sudden outburst of rage, Jerry said he stabbed both girls. The confession was videotaped and signed. Authorities now believed they had their suspect. The gruesome nature of the crime, combined with the confession and Jerry's past, seemed to support their conclusion. During follow-up interviews, Jerry's wife admitted she had long feared his temper, especially around the children. The community of Zion, already reeling from the loss, now had to grapple with a new horror: that the father of one of the victims was responsible. The idea that a parent could carry out such violence against his own daughter and her best friend was incomprehensible to many. With Jerry Hobbs in custody, the case appeared solved. Yet as the investigation unfolded, questions about the confession and the process that led to it would emerge, casting new doubts on what truly happened. Despite Jerry Hobbs's signed confession, doubts soon emerged. He later retracted his statement, insisting it had been coerced during an extended, exhausting interrogation. According to Jerry, detectives subjected him to nearly 48 hours without sleep, during which he endured threats, physical intimidation, and psychological pressure. He claimed investigators promised him rest and freedom if he agreed to confess. His defense attorney argued that the confession lacked credibility and had been obtained through unconstitutional means. The legal team emphasized that no physical evidence connected Jerry to the crime scene. There were no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints, and no murder weapon linking him directly to the killings of Laura and Crystal. His clothes showed no signs of blood. Crucially, no DNA evidence tied him to the stabbings. The defense filed motions to have the case reviewed, challenging the validity of the confession and the overall strength of the prosecution's case. However, the court denied these efforts. Despite the serious concerns raised, the confession stood as the central piece of evidence. With the prosecution unwilling to dismiss the charges, Jerry remained behind bars, awaiting trial. While Jerry sat in prison, his legal team began pushing to test unexamined forensic evidence collected from the scene. Items from the undergrowth, clothing fibers, and biological samples had been preserved, but not all had undergone modern DNA analysis. The defense hoped that new testing could yield results that might exonerate him. Years passed without resolution. The absence of physical evidence combined with Jerry's claims of coercion cast a long shadow over the case. Still, with the confession in place, prosecutors maintained their stance. The investigation reached a critical juncture. No trial date had been set, and doubts continued to grow around whether the real killer might still be free. In 2008, 3 years after the murders, Jerry Hobbs's defense attorney filed a motion requesting independent testing of preserved biological samples collected from Laura Hobbs's body. Although prosecutors initially resisted the request, a court order granted permission to proceed. The results were unexpected and profound. Male DNA was detected in semen found on Laura's body, along with foreign skin cells located beneath her fingernails. None of it matched Jerry Hobbs. The presence of semen strongly indicated a sexual assault had taken place. In contrast, no foreign DNA was recovered from Crystal Tobias's body. However, given the shared location, time, and method of killing, authorities still believed both girls were murdered by the same individual. The forensic evidence introduced a serious challenge to the prosecution's theory. Despite this, the lead prosecutor publicly downplayed the significance of the DNA. He suggested that the semen might have been the result of post-mortem contamination, possibly from the environment where the bodies were discovered. He maintained that Jerry's confession remained credible and central to the case. Undeterred, Jerry's attorney moved forward, securing court approval to enter the unidentified male DNA profile into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system. At the time, no match was found. Still, the results raised considerable doubt about Jerry's involvement and fueled efforts to have the charges dropped or the case reconsidered. Even with the new forensic findings, prosecutors refused to reconsider their position. They did not amend charges, adjust their theory, or allow Jerry's release. He remained behind bars, charged with 2 counts of murder, despite the growing weight of biological evidence suggesting someone else had committed the crime. The legal standoff intensified, with Jerry's defense building momentum against an increasingly fragile prosecution narrative. In July 2009, 4 years after the murders in Zion, Illinois, another disturbing case emerged, this time on the opposite side of the country. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old Navy petty officer, was found dead inside the closet of her barracks room at Joint Base Myer-Henderson Hall in Arlington, Virginia. Her body was discovered with a pillowcase pulled tightly over her head. There were no immediate signs of struggle, sexual assault, or visible trauma. The medical examiner ruled Amanda's cause of death as suffocation due to her medical history, which included severe recurring headaches and a tendency to seek quiet, dark spaces for relief. Some initially speculated the death may have been accidental. The scene appeared unusually undisturbed, and there were no signs of forced entry into her room. However, closer examination raised several red flags. Amanda's personal electronics, her laptop and tablet, were missing. A male shoe print was also documented near the scene. These inconsistencies contradicted theories of an accidental death and suggested the possibility of foul play. Still, the investigation moved slowly, hindered by the absence of witnesses and a clear suspect. Military investigators kept the case open, but with limited evidence and no confirmed leads, Amanda's death remained officially unsolved. Forensic tests were conducted, but they did not yield an immediate suspect. While suspicions grew within the investigative community, no arrests were made. At the time, there was no known connection between Amanda's case and any prior homicides. Although it received less national attention, Amanda Snell's death disturbed those closest to her and raised deeper concerns about unexplained deaths occurring under seemingly routine circumstances. What appeared to be an isolated tragedy would later take on greater significance as investigators began to draw parallels between previously unconnected crimes. In early 2010, Arlington, Virginia, was shaken by a disturbing pattern of violent attacks targeting women. The first incident involved a woman who narrowly escaped an armed man attempting to force her into a vehicle. The suspect was driving a beige Dodge Durango. Although visibly shaken, she managed to flee and report the incident. Authorities took her account seriously, but had little to pursue beyond her description. Weeks later, 2 more women were attacked inside their Arlington residence. The assailant tied them up and ransacked the home. One of the women was then abducted, taken to a remote area, raped, and left unconscious in the snow. Miraculously, she survived the ordeal and was able to provide police with a detailed description of both her attacker and the vehicle he drove. Her information proved crucial. Investigators soon linked this incident to another attempted abduction that had occurred just hours earlier under similar circumstances. Patterns emerged. Same vehicle type, same method of approach, and the same disregard for human life. Authorities intensified their efforts, determined to stop the perpetrator before he struck again. The turning point came when police identified Jorge Avila Torres, a soldier stationed at the same military base where Amanda Snell had died the year before. A search of Torres's beige Dodge Durango yielded damning evidence. Inside the vehicle, officers recovered a stun gun, duct tape, and several personal items belonging to the victims. The discoveries provided a direct link between Torres and the series of attacks. Torres was arrested and charged. His military affiliation and proximity to Amanda Snell's death raised immediate questions. What began as seemingly isolated attacks now hinted at a deeper, more unsettling connection that would soon lead investigators back to a case once thought solved. With Jorge Avila Torres in custody for the Arlington attacks, investigators turned their attention to the unresolved death of Amanda Snell. Suspicion had lingered, but direct evidence had been scarce. Hoping to elicit more information, authorities placed a confidential informant in Torres's jail cell. The move paid off. In recorded conversations, Torres opened up. He confessed in detail to murdering Amanda Snell, describing how he killed her not out of anger or motive, but for the thrill. He explained that after suffocating Amanda, he carefully cleaned her room to eliminate any evidence. He then dragged her body into the closet, closed the door, and left the scene without raising suspicion. Unbeknownst to Torres, he had made a critical mistake. During the assault, he had used a condom, believing it would leave no trace. But forensic teams recovered semen from Amanda's mattress pad. When tested, it produced a definitive DNA match to Torres. The genetic evidence directly contradicted his assumption that he had erased all traces of the crime. Additional physical evidence further sealed the case. A shoe print had been discovered outside Amanda's closet in 2009. Investigators re-examined the print and compared it to sneakers owned by Torres. The size, tread pattern, and wear matched precisely. It was another conclusive link between Torres and Amanda's murder. The jailhouse confession, combined with the forensic evidence, eliminated any remaining doubt. Amanda Snell's death, once ruled suspicious but inconclusive, was now definitively classified as a homicide. Torres's own words, backed by hard science, confirmed the truth. What began as quiet suspicion had now turned into a solid criminal case, one that revealed the first proven murder by a man who had already left a trail of violence behind him. After Jorge Avila Torres's DNA profile was uploaded to the FBI database, a long-awaited development emerged in Zion, Illinois. The biological evidence preserved from the 2005 murder of Laura Hobbs was tested again. This time there was a match. Torres's DNA was conclusively identified as the source of the semen found on Laura's body. For years, prosecutors had dismissed this evidence or downplayed its importance. Now, with a verified link to a known violent offender, the course of the case shifted dramatically. The man who had raped and murdered in Arlington had, it now appeared, done the same in Zion. Investigators dug deeper into Torres's background. They learned that in 2005, when Laura and Crystal were killed, Torres had been living in Zion. At just 16 years old at the time, he had not been considered a suspect during the original investigation. However, new interviews with neighborhood children revealed that Laura and Crystal both knew Torres. He was known to spend time around the area and had been friendly with Crystal's older brother. The pieces began to fall into place. This revelation exonerated Jerry Hobbs, who had wrongfully confessed to the crime under duress and spent 5 years in prison awaiting trial. Despite a complete lack of physical evidence tying him to the murders, Hobbs had endured years of suspicion and incarceration. Now, the DNA results not only cleared his name, but also provided long overdue clarity. The match to Torres marked a turning point. What had once been viewed as a closed case built on a confession unraveled into a clear miscarriage of justice. The real killer had gone unnoticed for years, leaving behind a false narrative and a wrongly accused father imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. Following the DNA confirmation linking Jorge Avila Torres to the murder of Laura Hobbs, all charges against Jerry Hobbs were formally dropped. After 5 years in prison based solely on a confession he later recanted, Jerry walked free. His release marked the end of a prolonged injustice and the beginning of legal accountability for those involved in his wrongful imprisonment. Jerry's attorney filed a civil lawsuit against local authorities, citing coerced confession, prolonged interrogation, and a failure to pursue exculpatory evidence. The state of Illinois ultimately settled the case, awarding Jerry Hobbs nearly $8 million in compensation for the years he lost behind bars. The payout, while significant, could not restore the time or clear the emotional trauma endured by Hobbs and his family. The case became a stark example of the dangers inherent in flawed interrogation tactics and inadequate forensic investigation. It underscored how reliance on confessions without corroborating physical evidence can lead to devastating consequences. National attention focused on systemic issues in the criminal justice system, prompting renewed scrutiny of how cases involving minors, trauma, and vulnerable suspects are handled. Meanwhile, Jorge Avila Torres faced a sweeping set of charges. He was prosecuted for multiple counts of rape, attempted murder, and the double homicide of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. His crimes, which spanned multiple states, left a trail of devastation that shocked both the Zion and Arlington communities. The tragic story that began with the loss of two young girls ultimately found clarity through scientific rigor and determined advocacy. Years of confusion, legal missteps, and emotional turmoil were brought into focus by one definitive match. Though justice came late, it arrived with weight, altering lives and prompting change far beyond the cases themselves. Thank you for watching this true crime story unfold. Don't forget to subscribe for more real cases and investigations.